The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday, and I hope everybody is doing well. Hope you had a good day yesterday. By the way, if you didn't get a chance to, because I know it was a longer one, it was about an hour long, but anyway, yesterday I did release honestly, a really, really awesome podcast episode with Professor Demetrius Flaudis. He is the gentleman that I told you guys, I think in the past, that is really an expert when it comes to the ongoing relationship between Russia and Ukraine. And so, man, I messed it up. It was supposed to be a video podcast, but I screwed up a setting. And so, long story short, it's an audio only, but it is really good. It is really good. I know it's an hour long, so in case you know that's tough for midweek, save it for the weekend. But it is incredibly insightful to listen to him. And again, he's a British gentleman, so it's not like he's a Russian guy or a Ukrainian guy. He's not anyone that has skin in the game, and he is a very, very well-respected, geopolitical analyst, and then a professor, obviously. And he really does break down a lot of the history between Russia and Ukraine, and it's pretty fascinating. It really is. He actually reminds me a lot of. There's two guys that I absolutely love listening to, and ironically, I mentioned them in the podcast from yesterday. But this guy, John Mearsheimer, and then Professor Jeffrey Sachs. These are two, again, American geopolitical analysts that are just so good. And Professor Flaudis really reminded me of them and actually shared a lot of similar thought process, although there were a couple areas that were different with him. For example, Professor Flaudis actually kind of said some complimentary things about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, whom I'm not personally a fan of. I think the guy is a complete plant and a clown. But you know what? He thought he was resilient, ironically, a DSD pillar. So, I respect Professor Flaudis, so maybe I will look into Zelensky a little more. Maybe he's not as big of a puppet as I thought. Who knows? Anyway, really good episode, really insightful. I think it will absolutely help you understand the Russia-Ukraine situation. And more importantly, that is one of the things I've been wanting to shed a little light on, because I think it also speaks to just understanding the bigger picture of what's going on in the world, and not necessarily just, again, not just believing the initial news story and the initial narrative that gets said. And in this case, it was, Putin's brutal invasion. How many times did we hear that phrase in March of 2022? And again, maybe that is true, but I think it's worth the time and just worth your overall building of your knowledge base to just hear an expert talk about that and really make you realize, okay, those coordinated political marketing slogans, that's what I'll call them. Oh, that's a great term. Coordinated political marketing slogans. Yeah, those coordinated political marketing slogans sometimes are just that. They really are. They're intended to create a mindset. So anyway, give that a listen. Actually, this is hilarious. I had a credit balance on a business shipping account through stamps.com. And basically, it was only like $15. It was $15.87 to be exact. And so all of a sudden, I go into my account and it's gone. And so I call them, and long story short, lady's super nice, obviously in some foreign country. And she's like, no problem. We'll go ahead and process the refund to your credit card. And I was like, okay, that's cool. How long does that normally take? And she's like, 4 to 6 weeks. I'm like, 4 to 6 weeks? How on God's earth does it take 4 to 6 weeks in today's day and age? Are you guys like printing the money and then sending it to me via Pony Express? What? That's ridiculous. So I asked her, and again, I'm super nice to these people because they're not in any type of power position. So I said, well, could you do me a favor? Could you check with your manager and see if there's any way to facilitate that? Not that I need the $15. The problem is I probably will forget about this. And, 4 to 6 weeks from now, God knows what state the world is going to be in. So long story short, she puts me on hold for like 5 minutes, comes back and is like, oh, I'm sorry. We couldn't do it. It'll be 4 to 6 weeks. I was like, all right, no problem. I make a note in my calendar. It's all good. Literally like 30 seconds later, I see a email come in through my Chase credit card and it's like, you have a pending credit. And then the phone rings and she calls back and she's like, oh, good news. I was able to do it. Anyway, I share that because if you have an issue with your any type of situation, don't accept the first answer if the first answer is ridiculous. And in this case, 4 to 6 weeks is ridiculous in a immediate technology driven world that we live in. So just remember that and push back on people, because a lot of times, as long as you push back, they probably will do it. But if you don't push back, honestly, who knows? Maybe their process is, say, 4 to 6 weeks, literally do not process it and see if the person on the other end remembers in 4 to 6 weeks to check back. Now that's a little bit shady, and I don't want to say stamps.com was going to be shady along those lines, because like I said, it did get processed like 30 seconds after she said it was going to take 4 to 6 weeks. But my point is, always push back on that type stuff. Seriously, push back and see what happens. All right, next topic. I want to talk about the opening ceremonies of the Olympics for a minute, which took place on Friday night. I don't know if any of you guys watched the opening ceremonies. I don't know if you guys follow me on Instagram, my personal Instagram, that is. But, I'm both, Deep Shallow Dive as well. Anyway, long story short, if you did not watch the opening ceremonies and if you have not heard about the controversy, it was pretty ridiculous, actually. And it just was completely inappropriate. And fundamentally, it looks like they took shots at Christianity. Like there was a scene that was then said it was basically depicting the Last Supper painting by, I think, Da Vinci of Jesus and the Last Supper. And then they kind of reenacted it with like a goofy blue Smurf fat dude without a shirt on who looked ridiculous. And then there were other it honestly looked like other LGBT trans actors. And again, you guys know where I stand on this. I could not be more supportive of that community and really every individual living their life, like Wendy Cole, who was my first guest on the Deep Shallow Dive, who went through full-blown transgender surgery at 67. If you haven't listened to that episode, give that a listen. I am fully supportive of people living their life. I never judge anybody along those lines. But the opening ceremonies, they were just insane. They were insane. They had that scene. They had another scene where they showed Marie Antoinette with a severed head. And it's like, why? What does this have to do with the spirit of the Olympics? And then all the people that came to the defense, and I want to talk about that in a second, they were like, well, Marie Antoinette, she did have a severed head and she's a symbol of France, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, my take on that is I could care less. It's not appropriate for the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. You've got 10-year-old kids hopefully watching. I think the Olympics should be a rallying point for humanity. And so, if a family is sitting there watching the Olympics, why subject them to a severed head that launched into like fire shooting out of all these windows of a certain building and it was the first time they ever had like a heavy metal artist perform. It was just weird. It was goofy. And then there was another scene where like there was, I guess, like a headless horse or something. Anyway, a lot of biblical stuff seemed to be referenced. They seem to be taking cracks at Christianity. And I'm not even Christian, and I was like offended, and it was not appropriate. Now, here's the hilarious part. It's like you don't have to be offended. If you, like me, were offended by the opening ceremonies, that doesn't mean we're like anti-LGBTQ or anything. Like the two have nothing to do with each other. But we live in this society where that was the debate. Like all of a sudden it was like, oh, if you were offended by that, then you're against, you're against the trans movement. It's like, what are you talking about? These things have nothing to do with each other. I can be offended by the creative choices that you guys took for the Olympics and be completely supportive of the trans movement. So it makes, again, it really does make me think, and it proves the point that, I don't know whether it's on purpose or not, but like, why create this division? Why create this, this animosity between people? It's pretty crazy. It's kind of like the Adidas Bella Hadid ad that I talked about in a previous episode where, again, why make a relaunch of a shoe focused on the 1972 Olympics, which was known as the Munich Massacre, and 17 people died? I don't care if you launched the shoe then and you're relaunching it. Nobody cares. The only thing people care about is, why are you referencing a day that, quite frankly, anyone with any decency should just want to never relive? Because again, 17 innocent people lost their lives that day. There's no reason for that stuff. So anyway, a lot of controversy with that opening ceremony. The Olympic organizing team literally came out on, they caught so much flack all weekend from me as well. And they came out on Monday and they issued a formal apology. And then here's the other thing. There were so many justifications online, but then the Olympic Committee literally issued a formal apology saying, we're sorry, we basically mocked the Last Supper and we didn't mean any offense to Christianity. Dude, just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, I don't get it. And then here's the craziest part is I had several friends kind of DM me and text me and say, oh, dude, you just don't know what you're talking about. This wasn't meant to mock Christianity. This was meant to celebrate the history of France. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. You're wrong. And even if it was in awful poor taste, and that should never have been happened. And even if it was, why did millions of Christians and, quite frankly, other normal, decent people who have nothing to do with Christianity like myself, why were we all offended? Why did we all think it's weird? Why did we all think like, okay, what's the point of that? Why are you showing me a severed head? Why are you showing me this stuff? This is ridiculous. So it's crazy that people were defending that. Absolutely crazy that people were defending that. I'm going to give you another topic. I'm going to shift gears now to something else that, ironically, this same friend that defended that also defended something else that I find ridiculous. If you didn't hear about this, it's pretty crazy. Basically, Gavin Newsom in California passed a bill banning schools from notifying parents of child's gender identity change. So it says, a highly contested California bill signed into law last week by Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom has stoked ire among parents and politicians who slammed the gender identity law as a usurpation of parental rights. The first in the nation bill bans schools in the state from being forced to notify parents if their child uses pronouns or a gender identity opposite their biological sex. AB 1955 prevents school districts from being mandated to notify parents if their child starts using different pronouns or identifies as a different gender than what's on their school record, and prohibits school districts from retaliating or taking adverse action against an employee who affirms a student's gender identity. Basically, I thought it was a little more intense. I actually thought it had to do with more gender reassignment surgery. But it sounds like if a child decides that they're wanting to change their orientation or their gender identity at school, the teachers are not obligated to tell the parents that. And again, I don't think that's appropriate. I think they should be obligated to tell the parents. I think that that's something like if a child, says something relatively, again, this is going to be controversial a little bit, but relatively dangerous, I think they're obligated. But that is relatively dangerous because kids are not, especially at those younger ages, they're not completely formed in their opinions yet. And so if there is a situation where a child, basically, who knows, maybe they're just confused. Maybe they just saw something on TikTok or YouTube or something. But, the parents should be notified. I really do believe that. I really think the parents should be notified. Anyway, my friend, who's a really good guy, and we've been friends for a long time, and I love having discussions with him, even though we seem to have different opinions on practically everything these days. He basically says, let's see. Wait till you have kids of your own. Different light. I have a good buddy with a trans child. It's unbelievable and complicated. I said, okay, I understand that, but what does that have to do with a school not notifying parents? You would actually think it should be the exact opposite. That's something big in that child's life. They should notify the parents. Wouldn't you want to be notified if one of your children basically was doing that? Wouldn't you want to know? And then, what did he say? He basically then said, well, they probably don't notify the parents because that could put the kid in harm. Anyway, oh my God, man, it's just like so crazy that we argue these type things these days. It's not like him and I argued it. We just went back and forth. But I do think that, the family unit with a lot of this stuff is trying to be, maybe destabilized, kind of the way the United States sometimes destabilizes foreign entities, which right now Venezuela is going through some crazy stuff. We'll talk about that this week. But anyway, oh man, I just don't get it. I really don't get it. I don't get that things can be viewed so differently. I mean, oh my gosh, like in that situation, I honestly am genuinely surprised any parent who has kids of their own would take that side and say, okay, yeah, that's fine that my school district doesn't notify me of something that drastic with my child. I mean, again, I might be wrong on that, but I feel like the family unit and the relationship between parents and their children should be strengthened as much as possible, not divided and weakened. And so when you give kids the ability to hide things from their parents, in this case, at their school, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that builds the family unit. Now, again, I will see the flip side of it. Absolutely. And the flip side of that is I'm sure there's kids out there that don't feel comfortable with their parents and have strained relationships with their parents, and maybe they feel like their parents would not support, not only not support, but not even understand, and maybe even, discipline them, hit them, God forbid, worse. I mean, I think there have been situations where it has led to like the parents killing the child for something like that. Now that is awful. That is absolutely awful. But I think that's the outlier. I really do. I think that's the outlier situation. And again, that's awful. There's nothing good about any of that. But I don't think you should err on the side of an outlier situation versus erring on the side of, again, like I said, I mean, truly trying to strengthen the family unit versus weakening the family unit. Anyway, that's that. Man, that was an interesting world we're in. Really, it really is. There's so much stuff that people are arguing. All right, let me finish up with a couple other things. Again, presidential election, Kamala Harris versus Trump. It's gonna be wild. It's gonna be wild, and it's gonna be close. And all those people who literally 2 weeks ago after the Trump assassination attempt were like, it's a wrap, President Trump will win. He just won the election by not being assassinated. I remember thinking to myself, no chance, man. There's no way it's that easy for him to get it. And it's not. It's absolutely not going to be. You know, this race now went from something that was not close to something that's incredibly close. Now, here's the other funny thing, and I'm going to get into this more in another episode. I mean, literally prior to the announcement, I don't think anybody wanted Kamala Harris to be president. They didn't. There was no talk about her taking over for Biden, and then Biden drops out, and then all of a sudden, everybody is talking about her. It's just goofy. It's goofy. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. Okay, just to set up some stuff for the week. So there's craziness going on in Venezuela. There was an election. The current President Maduro was supposedly overthrown, and then he said, no, I won, and then they said, no, you didn't, and there's chaos. Venezuela is a very, very fascinating country, which I absolutely need to do a deep, shallow dive into because they are one of the most oil-rich nations in the world, and they should be an absolute version of Saudi Arabia because of their oil reserves as well as just capability with oil, and they're just not. So I need to dig into that. It doesn't make sense. They literally should be like Saudi Arabia. They should be one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and they're not. So there's craziness going on there with them. Catch the Olympics. It's fun. I'm going to leave you with 45 seconds of a super cool trending audio on TikTok. And all right, call a spade a spade. We'll catch up more this week.
And touch the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people leaving. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs. Their voices never shared. And no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools say that you do not know.
The ending was terrific.
This episode was brought to you by the new book Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.